just on Sven Mislintat, and now he's obviously a big part of this Stuttgart setup. He's the sporting director there, as well as being a style icon for men in their late 40s. Fantastic dress sense, and of course, that was definitely wasn't a problem at Arsenal. But you know, he had a 19-year association with Borussia Dortmund as an analyst, as a scout, as their chief scout, and then their director of football, for want of a better phrase. You know, I don't want to say instrumental, but he was very, very, very much involved in the signings of Robert Lewandowski from Poland, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang from AC Milan, and Shinji Kagawa. You know, he left something of a legacy there in building that generational team that Klopp built sort of 10 years ago, 10 or so years ago, that is now. You know, and then was poached. Well, not poached. You know, he was recruited by Arsenal after a sort of a mini sabbatical. But that just didn't play out as everyone had hoped, you know, from an Arsenal perspective. You know, summarising what happened at Arsenal with Mislintat.
In his words, Arsenal wanted to go towards a more contact agent based approach compared to or in contrast to the analytical approach that he brought to the table. I think when Arsene Wenger was leaving, and that's when Mislintat arrived a few months before Arsene Wenger was leaving the club, I think there was an acceptance that the entire club almost would have to be remodeled, because Wenger just covered himself or covered everything. He would spread himself so thin. He was across every aspect of life at Arsenal, and recruitment and contract negotiations, and obviously coaching and picking the team and training the team. So the idea when he left Arsenal was that shouldn't be what the club was going forward. So they brought in a few people. Even Gazidis back then as chief executive brought in Sven Mislintat to sort of run recruitment, and Raul Sanllehi to run, well, who knows, player agent relationships, I guess.
The Kia Joorabchian account.
Yeah, exactly. Who has Kia's phone number? It's probably Raul. That was the idea, that maybe marrying these two styles was a way that Arsenal could gain not just one edge, but maybe a second edge in the transfer market. But even Gazidis very quickly left for Milan, and that left a big power vacuum. And Raul Sanllehi kind of won the battle, I guess you'd say. And Mislintat was a little bit forced out. He was promised a role as director of football. I don't know, you know, all these different clubs always name these roles differently, but essentially he was promised the director of football role at Arsenal. He didn't get it. After Gazidis, who had made that promise, left, Sanllehi decided to marginalise Mislintat's impact at the club and influence at the club. So he decided to leave, and obviously he got the offer from Stuttgart, who maybe struck gold a little bit with him or with the work he's done so far. It's something they'd tried before. We talked about the managerial carousel, but I think since 2010, between 2010 and 2020, so that sort of 10 years, I think they had about 6 sporting directors, director of football, whatever name you want to give it, which to me is just completely insane. I feel like that's the person that really, at most of these German clubs, is laying out the vision, the long-term plan for these clubs. And Stuttgart just cycled through them. And the last one before Mislintat was Michael Reschke, who had worked at Bayern Munich before as sort of a head scout at Bayern and had done a great job, was credited, I think, with getting Joshua Kimmich. So that didn't work out, and they decided, well, maybe let's go get the guy that did well at Dortmund instead. I think a little bit of a Hail Mary, considering they went for essentially the same thing with the Bayern equivalent, and that hadn't worked out. But Thomas Hitzelsberger was appointed to the board at Stuttgart. He decided to lead negotiations with Mislintat and convinced him to join. And now here we are. Like, he's done an absolutely brilliant job. I think eyebrows were raised from Arsenal fans when they heard that he was leaving firstly, and then it was followed up with, oh, by the way, he's going to go join a team in the second tier in Germany. And it was a bit of a, oh, really? I guess he can't be that good then. but his work at the moment speaks for itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the setup that is in place at Stuttgart, I was reading a recent interview that he gave with the Bundesliga.com. And, straight away, first question right off the bat, he was saying that, he very much likes this role because he doesn't have as many people to report to. He is sort of the overseer of operations. I think towards the end, he made reference to, the reason why he can't be entirely thanked for the signings at Borussia Dortmund was because he needed, Michael Zorc's signature on there as well. He needed the approval of somebody else. Whereas at Stuttgart, by the sounds of things, he is very much the head of these operations, and I think that's kind of the role that he wants. He's thriving in it. And you look at what he's doing, and I think you could term it squad planning. He's planning for the future. He's planning for the next year after next after next, rather than sort of short-term recruitment that sometimes you see with other clubs. 2019, when he comes in around March, April time at Stuttgart, in that summer transfer window, he brings in Silas Womangi-Tuka, he brings in Mateo Klimovic, Tanguy Koulibaly from PSG's under-19s, and Sasa Kalajic. So, they're four attacking players that this season have all scored a reasonable amount of goals. I think apart from Klimovic, who's only got the one. But, that was a precursor to this Bundesliga season. This year, well, not this year, but 2020, he brings in Darko Chulinov, Clinton Mola from Chelsea, who, quite a few eyebrows were raised when that move went through, because he was probably one of the better defenders in Chelsea's academy setup, and he decided, actually, I'm going to fancy my chances at Stuttgart, because clearly under Mislintat and Materazzo, there's a pathway there, and that's a fast track to top flight football. There's what he's doing there, I think, is fantastic, because the places that he's recruited these players from, you look at like PSG's under-19s, Ligue 2, Belgian's top flight, Italian Primavera, the Austrian Bundesliga. Even I think Klimovic was signed from the Primera Nacional B in Argentina, which is the equivalent of their second division. He has a scope which is unrivaled. He's looking absolutely everywhere. And again, I don't want to go all the way back to the Arsenal stuff, but you look at sort of the contact agent driven recruitment that is being done there. And to me, I just think that is perhaps a little bit more expensive. Well, not even a little bit. If you get it wrong, that's hugely more expensive. Whereas, if you spend €750,000 on a player from Ligue 2 and they don't turn into the next Silas Womangi-Tuka, then it's not a huge risk if you're a top flight club. But yeah, that's a bit of a ramble. But I just think that Mislintat and his work, the way that I think he just carries himself with a real confidence, a real self-belief, that's playing out in Stuttgart's season.
Yeah, it is. And when you mentioned the fees involved for those players as well, like you say, if you don't get a Wamangituka, who cares? Because you will get one eventually. And when you do get one, you're going to be able to sell him for 30 million. So you're making a profit on all of that money that goes out in the end anyway, just by striking gold once. I think the player that, signed from, you mentioned the Belgian first division there, the player that sort of embodies for me a little bit exactly how in depth Mislintat's influence and knowledge is Wataru Endo, who was playing in Japan when Mislintat first saw him and playing very well in midfield. I think he won a Japanese title, and Mislintat was reportedly a big fan. And he joined Sint Truden in Truiden, I don't know how to say it, in Belgium, and apparently was playing right back there, and they were finishing bottom half of the table. And Mislintat, he'd scouted the player, he'd been interested in the player before, checked up on how he was doing, he was a big fan, and saw that he was playing right back for a team near the bottom of the first division in Belgium, and decided absolutely not, he is a top class centre midfielder, signed him for Stuttgart, and that's where he's playing, and they've got promoted, and now they're in the mid-table in the Bundesliga. Wataru Endo is, for me, like I said earlier, the sort of the conductor of the team. I think that's just an absolute masterstroke. Who else is out there taking right backs from bad Belgian teams and turning them into standout Bundesliga midfielders because they just see something that others have maybe missed about a player? I think it's just absolutely incredible the work that he does, the way that he does it in terms of future proofing. And, we mentioned all these players. Endo is 27, 26. He's the oldest of these players. The rest of them are all young. The rest of them are all only going to improve, only going to attract more attention. And when they do attract more attention, they're going to give Stuttgart an absolute fortune to play with and to replace them with.
To answer your question, nobody else does that. Nobody else sees a Sint-Truiden right back and thinks, right, they're a fantastic Bundesliga central midfielder who's going to be the reliability factor in this exciting team. We're waxing lyrical about it.